some of the people here for the event today. Okay,
Where do you live now?
Swissvale.
Okay.
hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. Edgewood. Hello, how's it going?
Ping pong and tennis.
Oh, the inclined plane.
So I guess. Okay, so yep, nice little ball field. I guess this is where the Ku Klux Klan descended on Lilly to try to harass some of the Catholic immigrants here. You know, they thought they were coming to take their jobs and put some kind of papal dictatorship. So they came here, and then a large gun battle ensued. So, okay. Okay, so they call it the Valiant 28. I guess I'll learn more about them later. And, you know, some of the other local mural to honor the dead, the war dead, to serve the living. Okay, they do have some more memory walkway. Okay, so here, this is some of the other honoring the coal miners. Okay, from this okay, things from the Civil War. Okay. Okay, the memorial for the okay, this is for the dead in World Wars I and II. Infantry regiment. Okay, this is a monument to the Civil War. Casualties. Okay. Alright, so here's a monument to the local coal miners here in Lilly. Hello, how's it going? So this was first commercial coal mining in Cambria County. It was founded by Matthew and Michael Myers, sons of Joseph Moyer. Okay, the founder of our community. Yes, so it's a beautiful bronze relief of how, you know, how coal mining was done. So yes, so this is from 2021. Okay.
afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nick Molnar. I worked for the United Mine Workers. I worked for the United Mine Workers for a lot of years, but now what I'm trying to do is make people aware of the surrounding communities here in Cambria County. We were in Wimburn yesterday, and for those of you who are down there, the rules are the same. If you stand up and start walking around and start talking, I want to put you to work. But basically, we're here to talk about the KKK and their effect on Lilly. And there was a young lady in the back, I didn't get her name, wants to lead us in a short prayer. Where did she go?
She got back in the kitchen.
She what?
She thinks you're going to do the prayer.
I can do that. Ladies and gentlemen, this is another first. I've never ever given a prayer at any function. Excuse me, young lady. Would you like to come up and give a prayer? Yeah, you asked. You made sure that I did, so I believe that. And if you don't know the rules of the game, the rules are real simple. If you ask for something, I want to tell you, you got to do it. So come on up here.
She did the cooking. She's not.
She what?
She did the cooking. Oh, wow. This is the president of the Lilly, Lilly Washington Township Historical Society. My name's Beverly Mandachek. My name is Bev Mandachek. Okay. Wait till Ron gets out later. Okay, if you'll bow your heads. Bless us, O Lord, for these thy gifts, which we are about to receive from your bounty through Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you for all our gifts, for good health, and get us through this quiet week for Passion Week. Thank you. Enjoy your lunch.
They do have lunch available. They have sandwiches and stuff in the back.
They do?
Yeah.
You say how you want to start.
Oh, Paul, I should.
I think what we're going to do is,
Well, I could.
Is the food hot? Is that what I'm, no? That's
What?
Do you want them to get some food now?
Yeah.
Anybody who wants to get a grab a bite to eat,
Oh, you.
I will forgive you for getting up and walking around and getting a bite to eat. Right now, if you want. Nobody's volunteering to do that, okay. So,
I'm volunteering.
anyhow, when we first came into Lilly, the Pennsylvania Labor History Society and the Battle of Homestead Foundation was probably 10 years ago. We did a program in Altoona with the railroad workers, and we stopped by here with Jim Saloni, who met with him and discussed the things that were happening here in Lilly in the 1920s, specifically the KKK attack on this town. The outcome of that was we did a small program over at the Legion here in Lilly, and we presented Jim Saloni with an award for his community service, and that worked out very well. It was just, but we didn't really advertise it or just tell anybody, but we always kept Lilly and Wimber in the back of our minds because we wanted to come back here someday and do our thing. And the way the program, our organizations are set up is 1 year we meet in Western Pennsylvania, the next year we meet in Eastern Pennsylvania. And these kind of programs take a year to put together. So this year we're in Lilly and Wimber, and we want to welcome everybody that's not from this community. Welcome to Lilly. This is a home where the Klan tried to made a feeble attempt to intimidate the citizens of this fine and fair community. With that being said, I'd like to introduce the president of the local union here to come up here and introduce our keynote speaker. Where's Tom Merdula at? Ah, there he is. He's hiding.
I wasn't hiding.
Tom is also going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah, we'll open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Like Nick said, my name is Paul Mardola, and I'm the current president of Local 1318 here in Lilly. We were originally in Portage, and we were chartered in, I believe, 1973. I've been the president since about 86, so 30 plus years now. We're a very small local. At the max, we had probably 70, 75 people, and that was in the late 70s and early 80s. Currently, we have 13 members. So it's a challenge to keep our local going financially and people-wise. We've been operating volunteer-wise for probably 20-some years now because there's not enough money to pay the officers. But we still maintain, and it's been a blessing to do it. I'm also president of the Lilly War Memorial Association, which manages the field up here and all the events that happen there. So it's pretty much a full-time job. I would like to thank everybody for showing up today. It's nice to see this kind of participation, and everybody has an interest in what's going on labor-wise and history-wise. I guess my next issue would be to invite our keynote speaker, who is Mr. Chuck Neisel, the International Vice President of District 2. Mr. Chuck Neisel.
I'm going to shut this off. I don't think I need a microphone. First of all, thank you. I've never been a keynote speaker anywhere. I'd like to recognize I've got the group of guys that work with me. We got Danny Kane, we got Frank Runnaball. My brother here invited me months ago, which I was honored to even have the opportunity to come and do this. But it's always a good day when people come together to stand against fascism, racism, and hate. The world that we live in today, we're this close to falling backwards to where we were in 1924. But we have the will of the people, the will of the coal miners, and the wives. And they're just as tough. Probably twice as tough. My mother was married to a coal miner. She was a bag teller. Usually when I tell my friends she's a bag teller, they think that she made a lot of money. No, she didn't make a lot of money. Barely over minimum wage. Dad worked in the mines. But Mom was a strong one. Mom had to be there when Dad had to go on the picket lines and deal with the kids. When the strike was going on and Dad wasn't coming home, Mom was there. And Mom wasn't only there just to feed us and dress us, but she was there to whip her butts too. So driving through Appalachia and the Allegheny Mountains, someone that may be from New York City or New Jersey, wherever, they could drive through these valleys and not know anything that ever happened here. But the amount of historical activity that's happened in these communities is actually unbelievable. But I think where we're lacking here, and like I said earlier, we're only this far away of falling backwards, is because we're not educating our children on what really happened in these coal communities and why these coal communities are even here. A lot of these coal communities came from a coal company from Europe that they found coal here. So they built everything around, and then they built the company houses, and they built the company stores. And they paid them in fake money. They paid them scrip, not even American dollars. Paid them in scrip, so everything that they worked for went right straight back to the company. I'll never compare that to slavery, but it's pretty darn close. But that's where we've been. And where we're going to go now, that's up to us. But when you have functions like this and you have gatherings like this is a way to educate our children, because they're not getting educated properly in school, and it's not the teacher's fault. I love teachers. My sister's a teacher. Got a lot of sisters and brothers that are teachers. Somebody controls what we educate our children. They don't want to tell them the truth and the truth struggles. The Ku Klux Klan, unfortunately, they're still alive. How? Because there's other people out there that support their hate. They're in my community. Wasn't too long ago, I own a farm in Greene County, Pennsylvania, and I drove down the road and pulled into my buddy's place, and I seen a bag, looked like a sandwich bag laying in the yard, so I went to go pick it up. And there was a note in there. It was full of birdseed. It was from the Ku Klux Klan. This wasn't too long ago. And the letter said, I think it said something to the effect, this time is a soft warning, the next time it'll be a brick through your window. So I'm thinking to myself now, why in the world would they throw this at my buddy's house? Doesn't make any sense. Just as he used to be an iron worker, well, he was an iron worker for 40 years. His wife worked for General Motors in Ohio. Just a pretty much farmer. That's all he does. He farms, he raises cattle. Why would they make a shot at my buddy Bill? Because he's Catholic. Catholic. Together. And thank you for making me a keynote speaker so I can say but, it's always strange to me. My brother, Danny Kane here, he's the Secretary Treasurer Emeritus. He was one of my Secretary Treasurers. And be with you folks on that. I'm going to go, but keep doing what you're doing. It's a great thing. No, it's righteous. Keep it up. Thank you.
Somebody throw away the microphone.
You might be off.
Yeah. All right. If y'all give us a minute or two here, we're trying to work with the audio visual, but I'd like to introduce the president of the Pennsylvania Labor History Society, Jim Young. Where is he sitting now?
Jimmy, stand up.
There he is, back there. We don't have the president of the Battle of Homestead Foundation not here today. You do not make it? Well, we have Rose Trump and Charlie McAllister are both on the board. President of the Battle of Homestead Foundation.
Howard Scott.
Oh my God, yes. The guy that puts together our the Pennsylvania Labor History Society annual book and printed this up for us. It's Howard Scott in the back of the room there. It's called Howard. Okay, Danny's already been introduced, but would you like to say a few words, Danny? Would you like to say a few words? This is an open.
Yeah, I guess.
Please come forward.
All right.
This is, if you notice, I'm going way off script here, but I think it's important to live by our motto of an open mic and get everybody to say a few words. Thank you. Go ahead.
I got to tell you how much I'm encouraged by what Chuck had to say about what's happening in this country. We live in the country that we do because people 100 years ago stood up to hate. They stood up to prejudice. You know, we wind up listening to people who don't have our best interests at heart. I'm tired of people solving problems in this country by telling us who to hate and who to fear.
Thank you.
It's time to stop. You know, I was looking through some old papers the other day, and I found a speech that I made at a district convention. I don't remember when it was. We were at Naniglow. Nick was there. And I talked about the rise of the new right. This was probably 30 years ago. The right wing in this country is getting stronger and stronger, and it's time for us to put a stop to it. An English philosopher named Edmund Burke once said, "The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing." That's what's happening in this country. We have people who should know better, and they're just standing by and watching all this hatred brew around us. Well, I'm not going to put up with it. I'm going to take a stand. I'm going to start going to school board meetings. I'm going to start going to borough council meetings. I'm going to start getting involved in everything around the community, and where these people stand up and take a stand for the evil that is out there, I'm going to speak up. I ask for you to do the same. When you hear people talking, about solving the problems of this country by who they can hate, speak up against them. When you're listening to somebody in a restaurant and a bar and they start spewing this hate, tell them about it. Call them to task. You know, there's still a lot of good in this country. There still is. We were a better country when we had more people organized into unions.
Amen.
Yeah.
And I've been fortunate. When I got out of college and went to work in the coal mines right away, listen, I was thrilled. A lot of people said, "What the hell are you doing working in the coal mines? You just got out of college." I'm doing it because it's organized, it's represented by the United Mine Workers of America, the greatest union on the earth. And it's time we get back to that attitude in this country. That we recognize that everyone should belong to a union, and everybody should stand up for what's right in the workplace. So I'm going to get down off my soapbox here briefly, because you get me going and I could go on forever. But listen, I want to thank you for everything you do for the union. I want to thank my brother Chucky Neisel for the kind words. And I feel fortunate to have guys like him and some of the other younger guys who have taken up the leadership mantle in this union now that some of us have retired. Give Chucky a hand. So thanks a lot for everything that you do for working people, and keep fighting for what's right.
It's okay.
Okay, the next person we're going to have speak is Jackie Cavalier. She's going to talk about how women took the vote. And I think we've already heard from Chuck Neisel about the strength of women in our community. And I believe that Jackie's going to give us some proper guidance in that direction. Jackie Cavalier.
Yeah, sure. I'm still going to keep my fingers crossed that the slides work. The projector connects here in hopes that we can get some slides, since the a picture paints 1,000 words, so sometimes the images, of course, are quite compelling. My name's Jackie Cavalier, and I am a professor of history at the Community College of Allegheny County in Pittsburgh, and I'm a proud member of the Battle of Homestead Foundation, and I am a member of the AFT and a former AFT vice president for the local 2067. And I can't agree more with the gentlemen who came before me. interestingly enough, teaching in the community college and teaching history in the community college, I have the honor of encountering students from all walks of life. I'm not at a quote, university where there's the more traditional age students who are coming in at 18, 19, 20. But I have students who are of traditional age, students who are younger than that, students who are quite older than that, students who have worked and lost their jobs and returned to school to retrain or change careers midstream, whatever the case might be. I've been there for 22 years. I never thought I'd see the day where teaching history became such a challenge at the college level. It really causes a moment of pause as I'm putting together information, as I'm looking at materials I've used in the past and wondering how they might be interpreted or misinterpreted today. And it's, like I said, it's quite a challenge. The Union, of course, is near and dear to my heart. My grandfather immigrated to the United States from Italy in 1913. And he went straight to the coal mine. And my father, who just passed, I've just buried my father on Wednesday. My father was a true blue Union man. And for those of you who've heard me speak before, you know I tell the story over and over again. There was never a day that we sat down at the table that my dad didn't remind us that it was the Union who put the food on the table. And it was the Union who provided the house that we lived in because he had a good Union job. And it was the Union who allowed for our education. And of course, the list goes on. My mother predeceased my dad by 3 months in December. They were married for 71 years. And while my mom was a traditional homemaker, wonderful mother, wonderful wife, I always chuckle when I talk about women's rights and the women's rights movement because I used to tease my mom when she was in her 70s and she decided at that point in time that she was going to lead her own revolt and her own strike against my dad. And she threw down the gauntlet and said, "No more cooking. From now on, we're going out to eat." In fact, we made her a little protest sign. So she was on strike for sure from that point on. Courage in women is often mistaken for insanity. These words are seen on bumper stickers, posters, pins, and the like. It's a phrase that might give one a moment for pause, a moment of consideration, and then it becomes one of those historical quotes in which we are familiar, but or not. And some probably did, but not Alice Paul. She went right back to work. She's surrounded by herself with other activist-minded women, people like Crystal Eastman. And it was she and Crystal Eastman in 1923 who then authored the Equal Rights Amendment. It's very simply put, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States on any account, or any state, on account of sex. In the 1920s, under Paul's leadership, the National Women's Party drafted 600 pieces of legislation, 600 pieces of legislation in support of equal rights for women on the state, local, and national levels, including bills covering divorce and custody rights, jury service, property rights, ability to enter into contracts, and the reinstatement of one's maiden name after marriage. The lobbying efforts of the National Women's Party assisted in the adoption of the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, and they campaigned for the inclusion of Title IX in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It's important to mention that when we think about suffrage, remember the goal of the constitutional amendment, giving all women the right to vote. Unfortunately, even though the amendment was ratified, we know that all women did not have the right to vote. African American women of the American South were fighting Jim Crow, state-sanctioned segregation and racism. Certainly, Native American women are not even considered citizens of the United States. And even after 1924, when citizenship is extended to them, women are still prevented from having that right. So it's very important that while we look at the 19th Amendment as a brushstroke, right, we remember that not all women had the right to vote as a result of the 19th Amendment. In his work, Professor Peter Dreyer stated that we need to understand that many of the leading progressive thinkers and activists were heroes, but not saints. All of them had flaws, some personal and some political. It is important not to put them on too high a pedestal. I believe Alice Paul is one of those flawed progressives. She has been described as a racist, autocratic, certainly politically militant. But she was right about one thing: a vote is power, and it's much more than a fire escape. Alice Paul famously said that there will never be a new world order until women are part of it. I'll go one step further to proclaim that we need women leading it. Our journey is far from complete, but the important thing is that we have the intersection of organized labor, those advocating for women's rights. If we think about equal pay, if we think about gender equity in the United States, racial equity in the United States, if we think about women's reproductive health, if we think about the fact that we are looking at an industrialized country with one of the highest maternal mortality rates, what is wrong?
Especially for Black women.
Exactly. So the journey is not over, and I hope that we can continue to take up the mantle and stand on the shoulders of these women who came before us. Thank you very much. A special thanks to my AV specialist over here. I'm joking.
Friday's best.
It's a little crowded up here.
Nick, I'd like to make a comment. That was a great presentation. There's a wonderful movie, Iron-Jawed Angels, that if anybody, because you couldn't see what they were doing there on your screen, but Iron-Jawed Angels, it's a movie, it's been around for, I don't know, like 10, 12 years, but it's a wonderful depiction of Alice Paul and the silent sentinels that were at the White House, if anybody wants to look it up.
Thank you. I just want to add too, the PBS, the American Experience, has a two-part documentary. It's quite lengthy. It's an hour and a half each part, so it's a total of 3 hours. But it's called The Vote, and it was done for the centennial celebration. But it really delves using a lot of primary footage and documents and so on and so forth. But it also looks at of course the racial disparity as well. So it's a great documentary, and you can watch it streaming on PBS.
Thank you, Jackie. Certainly appreciate it. At this time, I'm going to have Rose Trump, who is a member of the Battle of Homestead Foundation board member, also a union organizer for, which local union was that now?
SEIU 585.
SEIU 585, actually one of the largest locals unions in Allegheny County. Rose, would you
Well,
please?
thank you.
Would you
Well,
please introduce our
it's my pleasure. Kip Dawson is up next. Kip Dawson is now a Mother Jones, and so is Jackie Cavalier. We gave her the award a few years ago, and I want to share with you that both Chuck and Danny's presentation, as well as the reinforcement of these women's remarks, shows and demonstrates why unions do make this a better country. We not only talk about wages, hours, and conditions of employment, but we do talk about the need for her local union and the American Federations of Teachers. In addition, her early career was spent in the mines as a coal miner. She was one of those pathbreaker female coal miners that went underground and dug coal for her living and did a wonderful job and made the way for other women to be able to come in and to be appreciated and to be respected and to work with her co-workers to build the mine workers union and their endeavors for better wages, hours, and conditions of employment for their unions and their members. She's a community activist. She's a civil rights leader. She's a human rights leader. She's willing to be with us today, except that unfortunately, that COVID bug struck just before she came. But she's here on Zoom, and let me tell you, just as we enjoyed Jackie's presentation, you're in for a treat for Kip's presentation on telling the struggle of women and African Americans in the workplace, and we're so appreciative that she's able to do this today. And please welcome Kip Dawson.
Just give us a minute to get this set up. We're working on
They're leaving.
Is it gonna be okay?
not yet. But if you keep talking,
Okay, testing the sound. This is Kip Dawson talking from Pittsburgh.
can anybody hear that
Checking
back
to see
there?
if you can hear me.
Can anybody?
Hi, I'm Paul Ricky. GE.
Hello, Lilly. Is it possible you can hear me? Kip Dawson speaking from Pittsburgh.
Actually, I'm from Johnstown. So I do run a website called Allegheny Independent Media, and I wrote this book about Johnstown.
Okay, this is another attempt to make sure that it's possible for us to communicate today.
Journalist. I'm a data journalist, yeah.
Checking again to see if the mic is working well enough for us to be able to do this.
Yeah, kind of like Nate Silver, you know.
Yeah. Oh, data journalist. Oh, yeah, right. So, I thought you said data.
Well, I hope not.
So it's a beautiful day here in Pittsburgh, and this has been an exciting time to listen to these wonderful presentations from Lilly. Are we okay?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, I bet.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much to everyone who's making it possible for me to learn with you today. I've been listening with great pleasure and learning a lot from the wonderful presentations here. A big thanks to Rose Trump, the Battle of Homestead Foundation, the Labor History Society,
Ladies and gentlemen. I can't whistle.
$40 to $80 cheese.
Ladies and gentlemen, one of the things that I've noted here so far today, this is a great educational program, and I'm hoping that everybody learns a little bit of something, but the reality is we haven't really talked about what happened here in Lilly. And I think that it deserves a few minutes. So I want to, right off the top of my head, try to explain what happened. Early in, I guess would have been March of the year 1923 when the Klan came in, there was a, mine workers had a convention in, I believe it was in Columbus at that time, but one of the movements that went on was to a group of miners from the southern part of the country wanted to remove the language in the Constitution that barred discrimination, and particularly the section about the KKK, because it was such a powerful organization and they wanted to support it. And that resolution was voted down by the United Mine Workers membership, not unanimously, but it was definitely voted down not to change that language in our founding constitution. What the outcome of that was, here in Lilly, the United Mine Workers local union exposed 4 members of their community who were members of the KKK, and the company forthwith removed them from employment. Well, the first thing they did was contact their KKK representatives in Johnstown and Pittsburgh and surrounding communities, and a gentleman by the name of, I believe it was Swank, but don't sort of swear me to that right now. Like I said, I'm doing this off the cuff. Hired a train to come out of Pittsburgh to here in Lilly. And they stopped coming the whole way up the main line, picking up passengers. Men were standing along the railroad stations with a brown bag under their arm, which inside that brown bag were their robes and their hoods and their paraphernalia that they bring to these things, which I don't know what all they would bring to a cross burning, but the brown bag was the symbol to get on the Ku Klux Klan special. That's what it was called. And it came, the final stop was here in Lilly. I just found out a little bit of information from my friend here who's writing a book about his grandfather this morning, but what happened, there was 400 Klansmen on that KKK special. And there was also the regular train coming out of the Altoona area, just stopping here, and there were Klan members on it. But then, obviously, because it was a regular scheduled train, it was stopping and then moving on, so they had to figure out how they were going to get back to Altoona, but that was their problem. But the majority of the people came from Greensburg, Pittsburgh, Johnstown in particular, and to here. When they got off the train, they got off in their robes and they formed a rank of 4 men across and started marching towards the hillside to burn their crosses. And the lights went out in town. The thing that was happening in town at the time, there was a group of ball players, basketball players, who were going to have a tournament here in Lilly, and all of a sudden the lights went out in the town. Everybody up until this time, until I was told today, we thought that the lights were put out by the Klan, but it was just the opposite. It was, the lights were turned off by the citizens because they wanted to confuse the Klan and get them scattered. But that didn't work out. They made it to the hillside. They had their rally, burnt their crosses, did their dances or jigs or whatever the heck you do up in the side of the mountain burning a cross. I don't know anything about that stuff, but anyhow, once they got done with their rally, they started marching back through town. What happened was people in town, mine workers and the citizens, decided to get out a fire hose and hose them down as they walked through town. Well, that didn't work out so well, and as naturally as things progress, what happened was insults were thrown, then fists were thrown, then rocks were thrown, and then bullets flew. And that's exactly what happened. And 3 members of this community were shot. And I believe there were 3 killed, if I'm not mistaken. And then the Klan got back on the train after all this, the confusion and all the rioting ceased, and they finally got back on their train and headed back down the tracks. As they were heading down the tracks, they started throwing out their guns and stuff along the railroad tracks, and the kind citizens of Lilly, being environmentalists that they are, proceeded to pick them up. That was what happened here in Lilly. The citizens took it upon themselves. They worked in union and chased the Klan out of Lilly, but not forever. The Klan 30 years ago had a rally right out on Route 53 here as you're coming in from Crescent in the field on the left-hand side of the road. There were probably, maybe a dozen Klan members showed up in robes. And, and I said early on, the Klan doesn't just walk around with hoods and robes on. They do wear 3-piece suits, and they do run for political office in this country. We just came through an election where we had the Klan doesn't go by the KKK much anymore. You got the Proud Boys, and you got, I think I counted from the Southern Poverty League, just in Pennsylvania alone, there's 20 confirmed hate groups throughout the state of Pennsylvania, 20, and that's just what we know of right now. And they go by all different names and titles of Christian nationalists. They want this to be a Christian nation. That's what their claim is, but basically what they want to do is take away your right to vote. I mean, that was the primary move in this last governor's election. They wanted to have the authority to take away a citizen's right to vote. So our fight continues constantly. This isn't just meeting in this hall and talking about what happened 100 years ago. We're talking about what's happening here today and trying to raise the consciousness of everybody that we need to work in solidarity. I mean, we're not going to, the Pennsylvania Labor History Society, the Battle of Homestead Society, we're not going to pack up and go home. Hell, next year we're already planning on having our meeting down in Southwest Pennsylvania to talk about Miners for Democracy. If you all should remember that, the older miners that are here remember what the MFD was all about. We wanted the right to vote for our presidents, and we fought for that. We fought in the streets of actually Lilly. A friend of mine, Chuck, Cup Thrower from down here in Jimtown, told me stories about how he got accosted for fighting for MFD in Lilly. So, not Lilly, I'm sorry, in Portage. But anyhow, that's the issue we have to deal with. And the one person I really want to bring up here is I've talked to this young lady on the phone any number of times during this process of setting this program up, who's the president of the Lilly Washington Historical Society. And during those conversations, she started telling me stories about her family and how the Klan, her stories of the Klan and what happened to her family here in this town. So would you please come forward and And by the way, I want you to know there's a dinner bucket sitting back there in the corner. And what that dinner bucket is for is this historical society is a self-funded group. There was no grants or anything. This is a community group that recognizes their own history, and we'd like you to pass the dinner bucket and chip in to support the Historical Society.
Which one you want me to talk?
That
No,
one.
this one. Okay, you can tell I don't do much speaking. Back in 2003, Jim Saloni was the force behind it, but Jim decided to apply and establish start a historical society. And at that time, we were pounding the streets for new members, and I had a young fellow that I approached about joining the Historical Society, and he said, "Why would I join the Historical Society? Lilly doesn't have any history." Little did he know, as I said to him, every town has history. We are rich with history. One of our events that's historical, and the first one would be in 1921, when at the lower end of the town we had 38 Italian railroad workers die in fire, and it was a Friday. There were 65 Italian workers there. They were not immigrants; they were immigrants. So they were coming here to work, but they were going back to Italy. And Friday night was Friday, they got paid. Well, somebody started it was an old shanty in 65, my dad, my grandfather, Mr. Major, who was involved with, his kids are involved here with this building. They were all miners. My dad was a union miner. My grandfather got a union pension. That saved them, that pension. My dad was a laborer after the mine shut down. He got a laborer's job, and he didn't have much to live on. But I will tell you, that miner's pension made a decent retirement for my mother and dad. The union did that for them, and it did it for a lot of people here in town here. Because I'm involved with people in town with my agency. And I see a lot of people, the wives, the gentlemen, got the miner's pension, and it's alive here in town, and we sure do appreciate it. And I appreciate all this afternoon. Jim Saloni was supposed to be here, but he's ill, and he couldn't make it. I know he would have given you the spill, boy. He knows step by step what happened. What can I?
Great work with the Historical Society work. That's impressive. It's beautiful.
Thanks.
I thought it was interesting that you were talking about the newspaper articles. I'm from Bedford County, and I know most all the counties in the state, and I know that that's consistent with, media. They're not involved in these stories too much. Sometimes they are, but very seldom. Do you have any ideas about, sharing what you're working with the media? Any plans for that, or have you thought about that?
You mean as far as the Historical Society?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Well, right now we're trying to get our monuments around town. We're trying to get some of those restored. We want some grant money. Each one of those, we do have the labor. We have the women. Women laborers, some of our, what's that?
Ability to work.
Yeah, the ability of labor. We honor the volunteerism in town because, boy, we live and die in, all small towns, you live and die with volunteers. That's what keeps the community going. So we're going to keep going on that direction, but we're looking for grant money, so our monuments need restored. Our miners' monument over there, that's pretty much our pride and joy, and we still have a couple finishing touches that have to go on to it. But I'm telling you, the coal mines pound this every day. My office is right over here in the corner on Main Street, and that mine up there, no, they're a non-union mine, but I want to tell you, they pound this They pound this every day. And I had I had 2 truckers in my office some time ago, and they were talking, and they were telling me about I heard them discussing the contract up there, and the one trucker said, we had to promise them 100 loads out of their day. 100 loads a day. And I'm going to tell you something. If you don't think they make it, you come sit in my office someday. They do. They do. But I will say, you know, they come through town, very respectful. You know, it's other than the dirt from the cold, we don't have any complaints with it. Yep. All right. Now, does anybody have any questions on the ride? I will tell you something. They did come through town. I found a couple of tidbits this week. They came through town at the lower end of town by the railroad tracks. They come up the main drag. They followed this railroad track right up here that's right behind here. They come up this way. I think they went, I don't know that they went that far up in the woods, but Piper's had a mine over here, and it wasn't Union. They had a mine over here. And I think they come up beyond Piper's mine somewhere, and that's where they burnt their cross. Then they came back down, and I did talk to the gentleman's family who, they said he owned a power plant. They didn't know if he owned it by himself, if he owned it with somebody else. He was the one that threw the switch. And yes, it was everybody thinking that they threw the switch so the Klansmen could get through. And he said no, he threw the switch because he was German and his wife was Irish. He didn't want any part of this. So he did throw the switch, kept it off for 2 hours, and then he went back down and turned it back on. So, but I have, we were just talking back there, and a lot of people who bought houses, when the Klans left, they left their gear in the house. They didn't take it with them. My old neighbor up on Lilly Mountain, when she bought her house, they went up to the attic, and they found costumes. And when the parents found out what they were, they shooed the kids out in the yard, and they burnt them. But I've heard different stories where they have found those in different houses. They didn't take them with them. Did they? I don't know if they left them as a mark, or they just, and you know, I don't know what their thinking was. Yeah.
Disrespectful.
But believe me, they can be intimidating. I saw that for myself. But, yeah.
How did the people who got killed, how did that happen?
They said, Melvin, do you know
when the train came up, the special, it went up, left the bomb, stopped the Blitzen, turned around, came back to the station, but didn't stop the station. There was a west section there they pulled over, and right in front of it, there was another track before the main one, there was a boxcar. And what happened, right, there was where Cookies is now, and that other building, there was a store there. 3 of them were going in that store. Now, because the boxcar was there, the ones that were shooting from the train were shooting up in the air, and a couple of them got hit in the back when they were trying to go in that door. There's 3 of them, they were critically, but they had to go to the hospital. That's how they, so I have to say it's ironic now that the new restaurant where Cookies is called the Boxcar. That's sort of ironic.
Well, the building down on the corner, Shulman's jewelry building, where this all happened, the bullet holes are still in the windows down there. Yeah, the bullet holes are still in the windows. He has it boarded up, but there's bullet holes in those front windows. And but they said there were bullet holes in the shoe boxes he had there, and boxes he had there. There were bullet holes everywhere. So, yeah, the shots were flying. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And yes, shots were fired against Lilly. I'll remember that forever. Right now, I'd like to introduce Garnell Washington to say a few words. Garnell?
Thanks for having me here. Thanks for having me here. Yeah, I'm honored to be here. I'm sure you have no idea who I am. I have no idea who you all are. Oh yeah, you're just Catholics. Those Catholics. Don't you all look alike? You know, like I've worked with. I'm from Bedford County. I actually graduated from Chestnut Ridge, even though I started at Bedford and all of my relatives are at Bedford High School. We moved to Chestnut Ridge when I was in high school, so you know we played Portage and football and basketball every year. And I graduated in the '80s. Penn Camry unfortunately beats my nephew's track teams and football teams regularly now. It's a bit of an issue for our family. We're not really into Penn Camry right now. But anyway, you know, I go by GE if it just like General Electric. But in Bedford, my Christian name is Garnell, and I met Nick and Melanie through Ed and Carlise through the NAACP, and I'm a laid-off professor, a community organizing professor. And I have different, like, I do outreach all over the country as GE around diversity and discrimination. That's my work, and farming, how to get people together to talk about things that they don't normally talk about, and it's a long story of my biography, you know, how I met Carlise and Ed. You know, it started with the shooting in Shellsburg, August 2020, of some Black Lives Marchers. A friend of mine from school shot them. The guy didn't die, but anyway, it was a black-white thing. So that's how I ended up here, was through their invite. And I was struck by listening to Joe talk and Kip talk, and so many of us talk about, you know, what is our personal connection? The speaker, she might have some great pictures that didn't show up on the screen, but without a personal tie, it means nothing to you. You can be nice people. I'm sure you are. Most Catholics are. One of my best friends are Catholic. But this stuff that you're talking about today, it's so moving. It's not about nice people, bad people. It's just not. I know you think that. I know you want it to be that way. Oh, why didn't, you know, you talked about the ministers. Yes. You know, it's not about the minister, he should do this, he shouldn't do that. Martin Luther King's speech from Birmingham, I'm forgetting the year right now, I think it's 1964. He wrote a letter to 9 pastors in Birmingham, Alabama. In the whole speech, you should Google it, it's just called Letters from Birmingham. The whole letter that he wrote to these pastors was about the fact that separating people out by their personalities was a sin. Imagine. You're a pastor, and another pastor's damning you to hell. It moved them not at all. I mean, personally, maybe they were sad or something, but as an organization, the churches in Birmingham never rallied to support King. Never. Ever. Ever. Never. So I think you should take a moment to thank Nick and to thank yourselves. I think the reason that they didn't rally to support King is because something that you're doing today is something that they weren't able to do in 1964. And today, most groups aren't still able to do it. They weren't able to sit down and say, we're going to talk about women's suffrage and talk about discrimination and inequality. We're going to talk about women's suffrage and talk about racism, discrimination, and inequality. And we're going to talk about the United Mine Workers as an organization, as a group of leaders leading our community that's going to lead us out of racism, discrimination, and inequality. That's what you're doing here today, right? I gave a little workshop for some students, graduate students, last fall in Penn Highlands, the college, and they were graduate students, master's students in social work. So they have their social work degrees, and they're getting certified to do more work. And I think this class is on trauma. And trauma, for anyone that doesn't know, it's like what happens to the veterans when they're in war and you kill a man. And they say, like, you know, you don't know what it's like to kill a man, I can't talk about it. And then they start crying. That's trauma, you know. So these people were talking about trauma in their communities and if racism would lead to trauma. Obviously, the stories that the Historical Society, I lost her, maybe she's a little short. Oh, she's back there. That was traumatic for those people on the video, right? That's trauma, to see like violence and to see, you know, to be afraid for your life. That's you know, there's different levels of trauma. Obviously, if you kill somebody, it's a different degree of trauma than if you see a cross burning on the street corner like she saw, but that's still an experience of trauma, right? So we were doing this talk about trauma, and the students, they just, these are adults, these are people between 20 and 40 years old, and there's 15 of them. They just were kind of like into it, some of them were, but most of them were kind of bored, and it meant nothing to them. I talked, and I'm a great speaker, as you can hear, so I was really giving my all, you know, I was trying to connect with them. I've learned not to do what I did in graduate school, which is stand up on tables and yell at them. I tried that a couple times as a graduate student to my students, and that didn't work. So I was trying, like, I can't stand up on these tables and just start yelling down at them. I didn't know what else to do, and they took a break, just like Nick had you take a break, eat something, and I actually prayed. I said, oh Lord, what am I going to do? Because I felt like we weren't connecting, and I really liked the project that these people were doing. And I asked them to do exactly what we just did. I said, can you make a personal connection?
I don't understand how people can live a life like that, full of hate. But thank God we've got people that'll stand up against it. I think what we should do moving forward, because this union, the United Mine Workers, has been around since 1890. And we fought this year after year after year. The best thing we can do is continue to educate, continue to get together like this. But one thing about our union that is probably the proudest part of our union is when it was formed back in 1890, they all got together. Now, how in the world they all got to Columbus, Ohio, I'll never know. Now, think about that, 1890. Last night, my brother Casey back there, he said, where you want to meet at? I live in Morgantown, West Virginia, so we met up around Evansburg. But it's as simple as me getting in the vehicle and going and picking him up and then driving here. Now, think about how they got around back in 1890. But they all went to Columbus, Ohio. And they couldn't even speak to each other. Italian, Polish, African American folks. We even had people that were, pretty much named in ethnicity. They were there. They couldn't even speak together, but they came up with a constitution, and there were rules. The number one rule was you can never discriminate against another brother or sister because of their race, religion, color. Pretty much settled it up right there. They knew that they had to get together because together, that's strength. They knew they had to fight together in order to be able to go to work and not get blown up in the coal mine. And it didn't matter if you're white or black, male or female, whatever the case may be. We've had women that have came through. Mother Jones, Sister Blizzard, that came from Appalachia, Cabin Creek, and have fought with us. But we're still here. The beauty of the strength of the activities that have happened through the past and the struggles and the fights and the running the Klan out of here has developed this organization into more than just coal miners. We represent teachers, we represent screen printers, we represent prison guards. Goes back to the point. Doesn't matter if you're black or white. Doesn't matter if you're gay or straight. We're all coming together collectively to continue this on. This needs to be here for our children. This needs to be here for the folks that aren't even born yet. They have to have it, because there's always going to be somebody like the Klan. There's always going to be somebody like the coal companies that are going to try to bring people down and take things from them. But like I said, it's an honor to be here.
Not quite certain why. Those profound words were delivered in response to the question, is she insane? The she in this case was Alice Paul, and the man who responded so insightly was the doctor who was sent to evaluate her as she sat in the psychiatric ward of the district jail in 1917. It was there that her tortured body was in full-blown starvation mode, and she was forcibly fed as a consequence of her self-induced hunger strike. 3 years later, on August 18th, 1920, Alice Paul and her allies, including Lucy Burns and other loyal members of the National Women's Party, would unfurl a purple and white ratification banner from the balcony of their suffrage headquarters in Washington, D.C. The banner donned 36 gold victory stars, one for each of the 36 states that ratified the 19th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, otherwise known as the Susan B. Anthony Amendment. It never fails when we discuss suffrage, and I think when suffrage is taught, the image that comes into our mind is, of course, of people like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And at that point, I think the imagery that we have is they're well up in age. It's worth mentioning that, of course, the risks of these women were instrumental in moving the cause forward, especially after the 15th Amendment was ratified in 1870, which gave African American men the right to vote following the American Civil War, but negated to include women at that point. But it's also important to mention that by the time the 19th Amendment was ratified, Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and many of the members of what were considered the old guard were gone, dead, by about 14 years by that point in time. It was the new guard suffragists who really took up the mantle and led the way in the period between 1910 and 1920. I'm always struck how students really have a limited understanding of suffrage, and it's embodied in Susan B. Anthony. And again, of course, there's nothing wrong with that, but a big piece of the puzzle is left out. Perhaps it's because the amendment itself is her namesake, or perhaps, and maybe more likely, there's a whole other part of the story that's skipped over rather intentionally. It's because that new guard, Alice Paul, Lucy Burns, Doris Stevens, Inez Mulholland, and countless others were willing to employ radical, if not blatantly militant tactics to bring attention to their plight and risk their lives for the right to vote. This approach was often not sanctioned by members of the old guard, and sometimes it was publicly denounced by that group until much later when they finally came on board. For years, the disciples of Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton advocated for a state-by-state campaign for women to get the right to vote. It was gradual, and it required tremendous patience. The New Guard, the members of the National Women's Party, championed a constitutional amendment. It was radical indeed at that time, right? A constitutional amendment that would give all women everywhere in the United States the right to vote in local, state, and national elections. Now, there's a little bit of history that's important here. because if we think about this, key period between 1910 and 1920, that 10-year period of time, Woodrow Wilson, who is a Southern Democrat, Wilson was the first Southern-born president post-Civil War. Of course, he was a professor of political science. Wilson was the president of Princeton University. He becomes governor of New Jersey and president of the United States, but he was born in Virginia, okay? So you have the Southern Democrats, right, who were represented once Wilson comes to office, elected in 1912 and inaugurated in 1913. So the strategy of the National Women's Party was very much laser focused on Woodrow Wilson. So much so that on the day that Wilson is inaugurated in Washington, D.C., the National Women's Party and the congressional committee that is formed in conjunction with the National American Women's Suffrage Association, they petition for a permit for a parade. And this large parade of suffragists march down Pennsylvania Avenue and take much of the attention away from Woodrow Wilson that day as he is being inaugurated. This is the first of only many political tactics that will be employed by the suffragists during Wilson's administration. Under the leadership of Alice Paul and Lucy Burns, both college-educated middle to upper class white women, the National Women's Party worked to mobilize women from different walks of life. Unfortunately, it was a bit limited, but when we think about the intersection between labor and suffrage, we cannot preclude the importance of the 1911 Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. That fire is pretty fresh in their minds at that point in time. If you think about it, with Woodrow Wilson being inaugurated in 1913, the fire occurred, of course, in 1911. 146 women lost their lives, most of whom were immigrant women. It's important to mention also that prior to that tragic event, those same women were striking and petitioning for better wages and a shorter workday. Alice Paul reinforced that voting rights, what voting rights meant for women, and especially for working women who were lower on the socioeconomic ladder, a vote is a fire escape. A vote is a fire escape. This statement is attributed to her in popular culture, and whether she actually spoke those words or not, we don't know. However, it is the meaning of that statement that was effectively conveyed through her efforts. A vote was fair wages, a safe working environment, and a voice in the government that would change the laws. In other words, something we all know, a vote was power. And it was power for those who were otherwise powerless in a patriarchal society who made the laws for them. While this effort was a noble cause indeed, the movement did not work in the same manner, unfortunately, to mobilize African American women. Racism ran deep in the America of that time, and especially in the Democratic Party, and it certainly spilled over into the suffrage movement. Mainstream organizations such as the National American Women's Suffrage Association permitted very few African American women to even attend their meetings. In some instances, African American women, African American suffragists, were not permitted to stand up and speak in those meetings and conventions. And the National Women's Party under Paul's leadership had to navigate that racial divide of the Democratic Party through their relentless efforts in lobbying members of Congress. In a strategy that intended to put intense pressure on public officials, it was the intentional choice of the National Women's Party not to alienate Southern Democrats by touting their commitment to black women's suffrage and racial equality. Now, These flaws, of course, did not go unnoticed, and prominent African American feminist activists, people like Mary Church Terrell and Ida B. Wells Barnett, were constantly, of course, bringing attention. Racial prejudice cloaked in politics had no place in a movement where winning the vote was to serve as an emblem of equality for women, an emblem of equality. Upon the request from Paul and other members of the National Women's Party on the day of the suffrage parade in 1913, the request was that women of color do not march. They do not step in place with their white counterparts. And some of these women, of course, were college-educated, college graduates, just the same as many of those members of the National Women's Party. Ida B. Wells commented, she responded on this by saying, "Either I go with you or not at all. I'm not taking this stand because I personally wish for recognition. I am doing it for the future benefit of my whole race." She and other black suffragists clearly understood the importance of representation on a much larger scale, while Paul did not. And although many activists believe that the struggle for suffrage and racial equality went hand in hand, the political strategy of Paul and the National Women's Party was laser focused on Wilson, and ultimately the consequence of his re-election in 1916. How do we reconcile this contradiction? It's very difficult to do. Wilson's 1916 campaign slogan, ironically, was "He kept us out of war." He was re-elected. He kept us out of war. We inaugurated presidents in March then, not in January like we do now. So Wilson was re-elected in 1916. He was inaugurated in March of 1917, and the United States.
Just take a second right now and just think about it. What is your personal story? A very specific story, like Joe was talking about, very detailed stories. Kip had different stories related to discrimination and inequality. What is your personal connection?